11C, report on the district budget update for 2018-19.
Good evening, Board President Reynolds, board members, staff, and community. Tonight I wanted to give an update on the budget. We have a big election ahead of us that will impact the district either positively or negatively. I think it's important for us to inform the community about where we are financially. So the first update I want to talk about is the term that is being used in K-12 education by districts. WestEd did a report called the silent recession. And we heard from Senator Portantino, and we hear from most elected officials that education funding is at an all-time high right now. And that is true. But when you factor inflation into that number, it takes us back to 2007, 2008. And at the same time, districts have received additional expenses. So the pushing down of pension payments that the state should have made is now being a burden upon employees as well as school districts. So this squeeze with new funding that's really 07-08 funding and new expenses, you're seeing districts across the state really struggle with this silent recession. And the authors of this article talk about silent recession because nobody's talking about it except for school board members and school districts. And the reason why that is a major concern, especially here in Burbank, 95% of our funding comes from Sacramento. And we hear over and over, last week I was at City Council hearing an update, you hear new ideas with new elected officials for early education, for mental health, for homelessness, for environmental impacts. You're not hearing education as a topic of concern. And when 95% of our money is coming from Sacramento, that is the burden that's being placed on us here locally. And the lottery funding is another factor that most residents I hear lately saying, well, didn't that fix the problem of education? We were promised that. Well, of our $156 million budget, we received $2.4 million in lottery funding. So we appreciate that funding, but that is not solving the educational needs of our students. We're addressing the educational needs of our students. We've talked about this, we verbalize it a lot, but we usually include this in our budget updates at the interims, and I feel like it gets glossed over. But the financial impact on school districts, and especially in Burbank, of pushing pension costs down to school districts is tremendous. Employees used to pay around 7%, and now they're paying over 9%. So the cost to our employees out of their pockets has gone up. But districts as well, we used to pay $7 million a year. We're now paying $16 million a year in retirement cost. And we don't get to set that rate. That is a rate that is determined by the state. It's an obligation made to employees that needs to be fulfilled. I fully support, and I know the board supports, that these are obligations that we want to make sure that our employees receive. But without additional revenues coming to the school district, it squeezes us. So we went from $7 million to $16 million, a $9 million difference. And if you look forward to 2021, it's going to grow all the way to $20 million, a $13 million increase. And in the 3-year budget that we have right now, that is factored into our budget. But I'll talk about in a second, that does not leave us any money to be able to adequately compensate our employees or invest in additional supports or in programs for our students. I won't go through the details of this chart, but I wanted to break down with staff how do we spend the new money that we keep hearing the headlines about in our school district. And you can see in 17-18 we received $2.9 million in new funding. However, after you take care of the additional cost of retirement cost that's been pushed down on us, our step-in column, so when employees move along the salary schedule, we focused on dual immersion program and class size reduction, and our contribution to child care. It was a negative 1.1 million, and that gets us to the point where we are deficit spending, and we have a structural deficit. So if you move over the chart, you will see in 1920 a $2.3 million deficit. If we do not receive structural deficit, if we do not receive additional ongoing revenue, right now we're using our ending balance to address that need, but if we don't receive ongoing revenue, we're going to have to start cutting around $2.3, $2.5 million to address that. So there really are only 3 solutions that districts have. I guess there could be a fourth. think we lost the PowerPoint. I'll speak to it. You can hope that Sacramento is going to fund education. And I think we need to continue to unite together. I know PTA as well as BTA as well as School Boards Association and Administrators Association. We all fighting for candidates that are going to fight for education, for our funding for our kids. But until we see that money coming, districts only have three options. One, they maximize restricted dollars, and we've seen charts, and I have a chart that highlights what Dr. Reynolds has been stressing and pulling the data and really showing that the investment in high-need students, we all fully support. Those districts have been able to maximize dollars to be able to attract teachers and provide additional supports. We're not a district that has that high level of need. We only receive about 36% of our population receives that money. We do not qualify for the concentration funding on top of that. And the second, as we heard tonight from some of our speakers, is to focus on foundational resources. Continue to support your foundations and increase funding, but that's a year by year. That's not a steady revenue stream, so you have to be very cautious about that, but you need to support it. We also have to realize that's not the only strategy. And also local parcel taxes. We know San Marino, South Pasadena, La Cañada, and to name a few that have gone for a local parcel tax. Or finally, if you can't increase revenue, we're going to be looking at raising class sizes, like Glendale and even LA Unified, cutting programs and services to students, or just freeze compensation. So I worked with staff to take some comparison data from 2016-17 that compares us to surrounding districts. And I used the data that we were able to get off the state website that Dr. Reynolds has been showing. And you see the blue bar highlights the base of local control funding formula. And you can see for surrounding districts, we're a little lower, but other districts have been able to compensate that through local funding. And that local funding either is foundation funding, local sales tax, or local parcel tax. And you can see how much San Marino, you see that purple bar, they're able to make up. And so they're getting around $13,000 per student. And then for us in Burbank, this was back in 16-17, we're right below $10,000 a student. You multiply $3,000 a student times 14, 15,000 students. It's significant funding that can go to our children. We need to decide locally, do we want to invest in those additional local dollars to make us competitive to other districts? Because even if the state gives us more base grant funding, we're not going to catch up with surrounding districts because they have that base amount as well that will go up. So to stay competitive, the question is it worth investing in those dollars? And the reason why it's important, and I've heard some comments about the district should just tighten its belt. And we've seen it through recessions, and we've seen it when times are difficult. 88% of our budget now is on people. It's our teachers, it's our custodians, it's our support staff. So when you talk about tightening belts in a district like Burbank, you're talking about laying off people and direct interaction with students. And that's not something I feel like people are aware of, and they need to be educated about that fact. If you don't want to pay $14 a month in a parcel tax, you realize that we will be tightening our belts by laying off people. And I'll go into more details about what some of those options are. This is a report that we get from the county each year. We got it this summer that compares salary increases for teachers over the last 3 years. And we want to be on the far left of this chart to stay competitive. So Baldwin Park has given over 18% in raises over the last 3 years, cumulative. Burbank Unified is on the far right. We are dead last as far as unified school districts in the county. That's 47 out of 47. With the vote that you made tonight to add, because when this was published, we were still in negotiations. You add the 2% you just voted on, we go from 47th to 44th. And this is probably the first time I've given this data to our Teachers Association. I know I'm going to see it when we start bargaining again.
In 2 weeks.
It's probably going to turn into a T-shirt or a poster. But it is critical for us to talk about this. because I've read things online and I've heard comments that it must be negotiation season. Your teachers are protesting again. They're protesting because we're dead last in the county. That is not acceptable. We are better than that as a community. We need to invest in our schools and invest in our teachers and our support staff. And the only way to do that is to raise revenues or cut programs. So we've talked about Measure QS for a while, and I won't read the ballot language, but that is what Measure QS is, providing an option for the voters of Burbank to decide. Do voters want to pay 10 cents per square foot of improved property? Again, the average homeowner would pay about $170 a year, $14 a month, in order to maintain lower class sizes, attract and retain our employees, expand instruction in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, increase mental health supports, and expand college and career courses. A yes vote will increase people's property taxes, but will provide for those things and allow us to be more competitive with surrounding districts. A no vote does mean there will be cuts. And I want to be very clear because we hear arguments that we have a balanced 3-year budget. Well, that balanced 3-year budget is required by law. We cannot submit a budget that's not balanced. How we're balancing it is by using one-time funding, our ending balance, ending reserves, to be able to balance the budget. If it fails, to address the structural deficit, we'd have to cut that $2.3 to $2.5 million. We've been working as staff to start to identify what are supports and programs that we offer that other districts aren't able to offer. We've already hit dead last on compensation, and the budget we have has 0% increases over the next 3 years in there. So we can't touch that anymore. So if we want to have any type of increase in salaries and address the structural deficit, we have to start cutting. So when you look at our teacher professional development, the support teachers we provide, the amount of days of professional development we provide, that is something that we do have a lot of support that we provide compared to other districts. Assistant principals at the elementary schools. We've already frozen one position at Jefferson. That would be something we would have to look at cutting permanently. Elementary music. Glendale has one elementary teacher for 5 schools. We have one elementary music teacher for 2 schools. It provides a much richer environment for our students to learn music at a young age, and we all know the impact that has on kids. Middle school and high school arts, we continue to invest and expand. We have a 3-year plan to invest more. If Measure QS fails, we have to look at starting to cut some of these things next year. College and career courses, we provide animation, retail management, stage tech. Our gifted and talented education program. The only position we've added to the district over the last 3 years is a half-time gate coordinator. Other districts don't even have that. That's something we'd have to look at cutting. Our elementary PE program. Other districts in the lower grades, they don't provide dedicated PE teachers and assistants. They just rely on assistants. These are all things not a single one of us in this room and watching on TV would want to cut. But if Measure QS doesn't pass, these are things we have to consider cutting for next school year. So the choice is up to the voters. But I thought it was very important for us to be able to be clear with facts about what those choices are. Yes, the state has a problem. They didn't address pension costs, and they haven't done it for 20 years. We can hope they'll start to address it, but I haven't heard a single elected official talk about that. We need to advocate, and we need to fight to make sure that our kids get a quality education by quality funding. Whatever just happens on November 6th, we're going to have to make difficult decisions on November 7th. And I want to make sure that the board's aware and the community is aware about some of those decisions. Any questions?
It's pretty clear.